right, for our next technique, we're going to do this, and we're going to do it with some Magicals powders. They are colored powders that are activated with water, and they have a bit of shimmer to them, which is quite fun. So the first one we're going to do is this one, and then we're going to be working on this one in between. So first step is to emboss one of the things or one of the backgrounds, and then we will carry on. So I've got my leaf stamp here, piece of scrap paper, and my embossing pad. And I'm just embossing with clear powder. Whoops. And I'm working on watercolor paper here. So this technique these techniques that we're doing for this one, we're going to use quite a little bit of water. So you need to use paper that can handle that water. And nothing better than watercolor paper, because it's meant for water. The other thing you could use is mixed media paper. That would work as well, just because you can use moisture on that as well. But I do like watercolor for this. Watercolor, or especially the kinds that I buy, have a bit of texture to them, and I just like what it adds to the leaves for this technique. All right, now, because I use clear powder a lot, I have it in a container. So I like to just scoop the powder and then run it over the paper, and it will stick to any of the ink that's there. You probably can't see it a whole lot on camera just because it's clear powder on a light paper. Tap off any excess. I ended up getting a line from when I dropped my ink pad, but this paper is bigger than what I actually need, so I'll just cut that off. I'll leave that on there, and it'll emboss, and it will affect the background. You'll see it, but this paper is big enough that I'll just cut it off once the paper is dry again. So heat gun to melt that powder. Tilted in the light, you'll be able to see with the shimmer if there's spots that have not been embossed. I think that's good. All right, so now I'm going to do the Magicals on both of these pieces of paper at the same time. What I like to do is spray my surface and spray the cardstock. Watercolor paper, even though it's meant for water, it starts to move and bend, and I find that spraying my surface and kind of suctioning it down kind of helps to control that curling a little bit. So I've got my colors here. I'm using a fan brush to drop them on my background. And you can see how it moves when there's an area that's got a pool of water. So this is from an autumn set, and I'm just using, there's another color in here in this set that's blue, and I'm just using the red, the orange, the green, and the brown, the fall colors basically. And if you want to learn more techniques with the Magicals, I have a class on here that I just posted recently that's it's called Magical Fall Cards, or Fall Magical. It's got those two things in the title there. So I do want to try get the color all the way to the edge of the paper. And obviously the water has absorbed into my paper, so it's not moving as much anymore. In order to get it to move, just mist again. And now I'm going to add some of the brown. The brown has a little bit of a copper shimmer in it, which is really, really cool. Now obviously the background with no embossing, you're not going to see, or the color is going to go over the entire background. The background that's got some embossing here, it's going to resist those magicals. So anywhere you see this beading here, it's because it's resisting. So I've got a watercolor brush. I'm just going to break up some of the powder in some of the areas, just to move it around. I want that color to go all around the cardstock so that I can pick and choose where to cut off, because like I said before, this is bigger than what I actually need. So I'm trying not to mix it up too much because I do want to see individual colors as well, but I also don't want to have basically clumps of the pigment in areas. And I'm just tapping it up and down to move that around. There we go. And if you wanted to, you could clean your brush between. I just don't have a thing of water here to clean it. And by in between, I mean between. So there's an area that's green here, and I would like to tap into there and move that around a little bit, but it's just gonna, I've got red on here because most of the stuff that I've been breaking up is the red. So if I do that right now, it's gonna end up being brown in there, and I don't want that. So I'm just gonna leave that, I don't mind it. And now we need to let this completely dry before we move on to the next step. Now, some of those areas where I have the embossing and where it's beading up, I'm just going to pull some of that up, just because some of the excess water sometimes likes to soak into the paper and go underneath the embossing. So I'm not doing anything to the background. I'm just pulling up some of the excess where the embossed leaves are. I mean, you could do more, you could do the background too if you wanted, but I don't really want to affect that. I want to let that dry naturally. All right, so this needs to dry completely before we move on, and I'll warn you right now, depending on how much water you use, it's going to take several hours. You could use a heated tool like this to speed up the drying. This is meant for drying paints and stuff like that. I just let it dry naturally and go on about my day, do some other chores. But if you wanted to speed it up, you could use something like that. A heat gun like we used to emboss is a little bit too intense of heat in order to dry it, so I wouldn't use that. Something more gentle is totally fine. We'll see you when it's dry.